They're taking our homes, folks, and we're starting to see mortgage rates at generational highs. Now, this is the kind of stuff that I thought I would never talk about. Even with the health crisis and how our economy has been during these past few years, I never thought that I would hear someone say this again, because the last time something similar happened more than 2 decades ago.
Mortgage rates topping 7% this week, hitting levels that we haven't seen in more than 2 decades. The average rate for a 30-year fixed mortgage rising to 7.09%. That's the highest point that we've seen since April of 2002. And it's just the third time that rates have exceeded 7% since then. For more on what this means for the broader economy, we want to welcome in Jose Torres, Interactive Brokers senior economist. Jose, it's great to see you again. So let's talk about the fact that we're seeing mortgage rates once again on the rise, reaching levels, like I just said, that we haven't seen in about 21 years. What does this do to the housing market? Then what does this do to the broader economy?
Thanks for having me. Well, unfortunately, rates this high, what it does is that it constrains the housing market. And right now you have existing homeowners they're stuck with low rates and they don't want to sell and then have to go assume thousands more in monthly payments on another property. So that's constraining transactions in the existing home sale market.
That sounds like bad news, right? So here's the craziest thing. Now, I want you guys to watch this next clip, and I want you guys to know that these aren't even a week apart. All right, have that in your mind.
House hunters are facing a financial challenge not seen in a generation. The average interest rate on 30-year mortgages soared to 7.48% yesterday. That's the highest level in nearly 23 years.
Man, I wish I was making all this stuff up, but that just happened. Now, if my memory serves me correct, the mortgage rates back in 2000 was at around 8%, 8.05%. Are we on the same path now with this housing market? Now, the problem here, and I think a lot of you guys are probably going to agree with me on this one, is that many Americans, they seem to forget that things are getting worse. They believe whatever they want to believe, and y'all know that the narrative has solely been focused on the economy being so strong, you know? Now, if that is the case, then why the heck are some economists telling us to save our pennies?
Your pennies, because unfortunately the economic outlook is going to get worse before it gets better. Longer term, I do think with a recession, you will get lower prices, which is actually going to crush many companies' earnings and further dovetail into more and more unemployment. So being conservative, careful with your credit cards. Credit card interest rates are egregiously high at over 20%. Obviously that's going to be an issue as the unemployment rate goes up. You're going to see more and more problems, but just really be careful in your spending. It is a time to hunker down and to try to maintain your savings rather get further into debt, which I know is difficult for many people. But it is going to get harder before it gets better.
I think it would be a little bit more challenging to have folks try and save money, because a lot of them are, how do I call it, engrossed in an alternate reality. Some of them have given into this false narrative that things are heading for better times. But since you talked about credit cards, let's go ahead and discuss that right after you drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Did you do it? All right, awesome. So let's get back to the credit cards. So why are people swiping so much? Is it because they can't afford their expenses? Or is it because they're living a lifestyle that's unaffordable? You see the difference there? Because there's this huge gap between those two questions. And I know you guys are sharp and you get these things, but not everyone does. There are people out there with thousands of dollars of debt, and whenever they make a little bit extra, they don't necessarily pay off their credit cards. Nope, not by a long shot. They suddenly get a cheap dose of dopamine, and instead of being a responsible adult, they decide to reward themselves with stuff that they don't need.
Credit card debt in the U.S. hit an expensive milestone this week. Nationwide, it surpassed $1 trillion for the first time ever. Now, that's according to new data released by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The average credit card balance per customer was just over $5,900 in the second quarter of 2023.
We're making history for all the wrong reasons, folks. And of course, there's probably somebody who's going to say, well, Ron, we're trying to build our credit here, and you're telling us that we shouldn't have credit cards? No, that's not what I'm saying here. Credit cards can be great. I mean, there are some that offer cash back. There are those that waive fees if you happen to reach a specific spending limit. There's tons of different rewards out there. There's insurance through credit cards. So credit cards are cool, all right? And here's a reality check that's really gonna slap people in the face. Credit cards should not be used to try to grow your debt. It shouldn't be the reason that you file for bankruptcy or something like that. Do you guys get what I mean here? So a credit card should complement your lifestyle, not run it. Now, if you asked, how much is too much? I guess the answer would rely on your cash flow by how much money you make and how you're able to kind of set aside money for a rainy day. And since you're already talking about paychecks, you guys remember quiet quitting, right?
On what's called quiet quitting. Now, Gallup says half of workers aren't engaged on the job, putting in just enough to get by. The analytics company adds low-level effort is actually costing the global economy nearly $9 trillion. Now, Gallup surveyed more than 60,000 people in the country to pull together this report. It's been tracking American sentiment about their jobs since about 2000. And more than half of U.S. respondents told Gallup they thought it was a good time to find a job. But perhaps here's the most surprising piece. Gallup asked employees what would make their jobs better. And the majority of responses didn't address pay, didn't address benefits, but rather issues like having more autonomy in their jobs, having some clearer goals, and being recognized for their contributions. And while half of folks are quiet quitting, about 18% are loud quitting, being actively disengaged on the job.
Well, a study found that this isn't a remote thing that's happening just in our country. It's a worldwide phenomenon. Do you think that the health crisis influenced this with the entire idea of working from home? I mean, the numbers show that a whopping 77% of workers are doing the bare minimum or probably just enough so that they don't get laid off. So here's my question though. Do you hate your job or are you just pissed at who you work with? Maybe you don't like who you're working for, because a lot of people have told me stories where it's hard for them to let go of their jobs because they're going to miss their colleagues, but not the management. The thing is, if it pays you well, why not stick around and keep the paychecks coming? But I guess different people have different tastes, you know? Although I can definitely see that there is a trend that's developing, because I want you guys to guess just how much the average asking price is for workers. I mean, what do you guys want as your annual income? Y'all ready to hear this? American workers on average are asking for $80,000. Oh man.
American workers are pointing to high inflation as they demand larger raises. A new employment survey out from the New York Federal Reserve found that the average reservation wage, or the lowest wage Americans are willing to accept for a new job, climbed to a record high of $78,645, which is up almost 8% in the last year. But will employers be able to deliver these increasing wage demands? Let's bring in Young Umar, BMO Wealth Management U.S. Chief Investment Officer, to discuss this. Good to have you on the show here. Now, we know that rising wages is something that Fed is saying is really the antithesis to them reaching that 2% inflation target. How are you viewing sort of this reservation wage versus the realities we're currently facing?
Yeah, we do think the labor market is actually coming into balance here gradually, but there's a lagged effect and you see it in things like this reservation wage. You see it in union labor negotiations, that a lot of these demands or expectations are built based on the labor market.
I guess it makes sense since inflation is really starting to hurt, but $80,000? Wow. And while I'm talking about money here, let's go ahead and talk about how one woman lost her home that is worth $300,000 with, mind you, a paid off mortgage, all because of a mere $3,000. Now, the issue is that the $3,000, well, that was for property tax. Now, you got to understand what you guys are getting into when you fail to pay on these taxes. I mean, you're going to lose legally, and this is exactly what happened to this poor woman. So what are your thoughts on everything that we talked about today? Make sure you guys let me know in the comment section down below. Before I go, I just want to thank you guys so much for hanging out. Thanks for dropping a like for the video. Thank you for subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the next one.